film begins with a true story that happened during the Vietnam War. We learn that the first person to report on it was Danny Lang in the New Yorker magazine in 1969. A man named Erickson appears sitting on a bus and suddenly sees an Asian girl sitting in front of him. Erickson keeps staring at her until the girl notices and arranges herself. At this point, Erickson goes back in time and remembers when he was serving in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War. We see Erickson in the Vietnamese jungle with 4 other soldiers named Clark, Tony, Brown, and Hutch. We learn that the 5 soldiers are part of the American teams whose mission is to. The tunnels that the Vietnamese resistance fighters made are destroyed. While they are searching for the tunnels, the resistance fighters appear, throwing grenades at them, but they are trying to save themselves quickly before anyone gets hurt. We see Tony, their leader, communicating with the support team to get them out, but the fire is getting very close to them. They keep running in different directions, hoping to avoid the attacks. Suddenly, Erickson falls into the tunnel, but his head remains above the ground. Erickson gets tired and fears getting hurt. At this moment, the resistance fighters appear under the tunnels. One of them hears Erickson's voice, so he moves towards him to kill him at the same time that Tony hears his voice. He quickly moves before the resistance fighters stab him. Then they open fire on the resistance fighters, and one of them falls to the ground. Tony immediately notices the resistance fighter who wanted to stab Erickson coming out of the tunnel. Erickson is freed when Tony pushes him away and opens fire on the resistance fighter, killing him. The next morning, he comes out. The 5 soldiers are walking in the Vietnamese lands and Brown talks to Tony, who is of the same rank, and says that they have a month left to fight and that their military service is about to end. It appears that Brown wants the war to end, but while walking, he has something in his hand. Then we see Erickson playing with Vietnamese children. They give him mangoes to eat, but Tony takes them from him and throws them away, forbidding him from eating anything from them because it might be poisoned. Erickson is upset, but he carries out the orders. Then we see Erickson helping a Vietnamese farmer in cultivating the land. At that moment, they see Brown and call him, asking him to leave him alone. They talk together and ask Brown if he is married or has children. Erickson tells him that he is married and has a little daughter. Erickson tells him what happened on the day of the operation. Brown laughs and asks if he is afraid, so he says. Erickson tells Tony that he doesn't know what would have happened to him if Tony hadn't saved him. Then Brown stands next to Tony and tells the soldiers that they will soon finish their duty and that they will be free again. But he doesn't get to finish because one of the resistance fighters shoots him and points to his neck. The soldiers keep shooting at the resistance fighters until they run away. Meanwhile, Tone tries to save Brown and writes down the blood and reassures them that he is fine. But Brown is dead by the time the rescue teams arrive and are transported. Tony is seen crying after walking. Then the soldiers are moved to another area and Tony asks them to get ready because they have a reconnaissance operation in the morning. However, they are off duty until his hour. If Erickson knew anything about Brown, he would have made Tone understand that he is dead. Clark gets tired and keeps cursing Vietnam and calling the Asians dirty people, the piggy bank of humanity, and animals, even though they are the ones who dream normally and think that total destruction is the only way to get rid of them. Astoni and the soldiers come and go to Malha Lily to spend their time there until morning, but they are prevented from entering. Tony tries to enter by force, but the guard prevents him. Tony gets very tired. We see the soldiers drinking until they get drunk. Tony enters with a second soldier to replace Brown, whose name is Diaz. After that, Tony shows them the places they will move in and gives them orders not to shoot, except in cases of self-defense. The soldiers disperse when Tony tells them that they are going to kidnap a girl from the village. They are going to break their boredom and improve their psychological state. He plays it safe and thinks that Tony is joking, but he is shocked when he discovers that Tony is serious and kills. It occurs to me that they try to defend their daughter, but they fail. Erickson apologizes to them and leaves. Erickson talks to Tony. He says that he was thinking that he was joking in Tony's pawn when Erickson blames him, telling him that what he did was considered a kidnapping and asks him to take over surveillance. He becomes even more surprised when he finds all the soldiers agreeing with what Tony did, and Hatcher tells him that their sergeant is suspicious. Genghis Khan is very excited. He is talking and they say that all soldiers do this. Erickson tells him that they are not Genghis Khan and that they are in the 20th century. We see the Vietnamese girl who is very afraid of Clark. It appears that Diaz does not agree with what is happening, and he talks to Erickson and tells him that what is happening is considered harassment and that the Vietnamese girl is upset because of the beating and she keeps coughing. Then Tony helps her and gives her medicine and gives her a drink of water. Then they ask Erickson exactly what they are doing. And Tony decides that he is trying to harm her, and they say that she is a member of the Vietnamese resistance. But Erickson doesn't believe him, and they say that she's just a girl who works in agriculture. He tells Tony that he's still a newcomer and doesn't know anything, but Erickson insists on his opinion. Tony consults with the soldiers and they say that they aren't resistance members, but the girl is one. Then he consults with him and they say that he doesn't know anything about him. Erickson stays and doesn't respond. Then Clark decides to take the girl with their bags and she starts walking barefoot in the forest. They keep walking until they reach a safe cabin and they decide to stay there until the operation's time. Diaz talks to Erickson and they say that he won't rape the girl, and they ask him if he was going to be beaten. Erickson agreed to join him and Bo and asked him to also stand by him. Diaz agreed and Betfax said that they would defend the girl, which made Erickson feel bad when he noticed the wounds on her back and approached her to treat her. The girl got scared and moved away, but Erickson reassured her and told her that he didn't hurt her. He tried to calm her down when she cried and told her that he was honest with her. Then Tony felt that Erickson had given up on him and didn't want to sit with him, so he sat next to him. Betfax and Pepper did what he did because of his anxiety about the resistance, and they said that all he needed was for them to cooperate. Then he took him to the Vietnamese girl and patted her hands in front of him. He said that he didn't want to cause problems with her because he was the only one who cared about him. Erickson got angry when he saw him, and he harassed the girl. They say that what he is doing is not right, so Tony is forced to rape the girl, but Erickson refuses and tells him that it is impossible for him to do such a thing. Tony yells at him and keeps making fun of him, and they say that he is definitely a pervert. Erickson then goes to Diaz to stand by him as he promised, but Diaz is afraid to speak because they are making fun of him. However, Erickson insists on his opinion and raises a weapon at Tony, who does not care. He goes to the girl and rapes her, and she keeps screaming. Erickson attacks them because they grow up watching her being raped. After Tony rapes her, Diaz grows up and rapes her after him. Tony stands beside Erickson after all the soldiers have been raped. The Vietnamese girl. They say that he hates the army, so Erickson says that what they serve in is not an army. They sell Erickson and say that he is the biggest whore in the valley. The next day, the soldiers go out to the mountain to monitor the resistance, and Tony asks Erickson to go back to the hut and bring back some ammunition and bombs. When Erickson returns, Clark tells him to stay in the hut and he goes in his place. Erickson tells him to stay in the hut and sees the girl collapsing and terrified. Erickson tells him to get closer to her and unties her hands, but she remains afraid of him. Erickson cries when he sees the wounds on her face and apologizes to her. The girl keeps crying. Erickson writes that she has a very hot and is sick. He gives her food and water to drink. After that, she eats and keeps crying, but Erickson doesn't understand anything from her and gets upset when Tony arrives at Erickson's location and forces him to go back. At the same time, Erickson decides to escape the girl. He tells her that he will take her home. When they leave the hut, he asks her to leave because he is afraid of leaving the place, which would be considered a desertion from the army. The girl was afraid to walk alone and let him take her. Erickson was afraid for her and agreed to take her. But Clark saw them at the last moment and took the girl with him on the operation. However, they were upset with her because she was coughing all the time and they were afraid that she would expose them. Clark wrote herself so that her voice wouldn't come out. At that moment, he decided to kill her. He believed Erickson when he asked him to kill her himself. He refused his orders and said that he was a savage and wouldn't have agreed to what he was doing if he had been around. He told Tony that Brown wasn't under his command before, but he was the one under his command. He threatened that he would be killed in the war if he didn't carry out his orders. Erickson asked him to leave her, but Tony refused and asked Hatcher to be the one to kill her. Hatcher was scared and refused. At that moment, Clark noticed the planes and they were all afraid that the planes would notice the girl's presence and then they would take control. Tony gets tired and asks Dezen to get rid of her. But Erickson stops him and shoots at the last minute to prevent them from killing the girl. At that moment, the resistance members notice their presence and shoot at them and a fight breaks out between them. At that moment, Clark stabs the girl to get rid of her, but she doesn't die and goes out onto the road, drowned in her blood. Erickson believes him when he sees her and runs to save her, but Tony is shot and the soldiers order them to shoot at her and kill her. Then the planes arrive and she thinks about the whole place, including Erickson, when he sees the body of the Vietnamese girl. And not only that, but also all the resistance members who were killed. He faints from exhaustion and the rescue plane takes off. Bev Erickson from. He is angry because he was dreaming about the girl and woke up to her screams. Erickson quickly gets out of bed and talks to his colleague. They find out what happened. At that moment, they see Clark and prevent him from speaking to him in Erickson's suffocating house and ask him to come near him. And they forget his friend to talk to their commander. So Erickson agrees to talk to him and goes to the commander and tells him what happened, but he is surprised that they refuse to let his wife into the hospital. And his wife gave birth to their son on the ground, and immediately after that he went to prison and was always thinking about revenge, but as soon as he got out of prison, he wanted nothing but to see his son and wife, and the commander asks him to calm down and forget everything that happened and asks him not to expect anything else in the conflict zone. So Erickson realizes that no one cares and that he will not be able to get his girl's rights back, and he does not know why he is in the army. However, Erickson refuses to give up and decides to talk to a second commander and tells him what happened. He also submits a report to him, but the commander rejects his report, saying that the Vietnamese deserve this war because they caused great harm to the Americans. And he transfers Erickson from his command because he will cause him a lot of problems. Erickson tells him that he wants to be transferred from the entire battalion, so he prefers to be more obedient and sells what happened with the girl as his mistake. However, he is afraid for Tony. They say that his report will greatly harm his career because he will be nominated for a high position and will receive a valuable award. He leaves the commander and walks. Erickson is angry and realizes that he will not find a solution. When he arrives, he takes a shift as a watchman inside a hut, and at that moment we see someone trying to kill him. They plant a bomb inside the hut without Erickson noticing. At that moment, Hatcher enters the hut, but he sees Clark and quickly runs away. Erickson realizes that something is wrong and believes him when his lighter falls on the ground and he sees the bomb. Erickson begs to escape at the last moment. After that, he decides to pick a group of soldiers, enters the room with an axe and starts cursing Clark. Tony and Vibe provoke Clark and say things that upset him. Erickson hits him in the face with the axe and Tony believes him. He starts to get scared of him and gets angry at Erickson. They say that there is no need to kill him because he has already informed the leadership and no one cares. Erickson throws the axe and goes to a bar and keeps drinking until he gets drunk. A commander sits next to him and tries to talk to him. But Erickson doesn't want to talk. But in the end, he gives in and tells him everything. The commander helps him and they swallow the soldier who is investigating the matter and writes the body of the Vietnamese girl. The commander who was defending Tony tells Vibe that he should be happy because he brought the girls right. Vibe smells Erickson and he leaves. After that, the soldiers go to the investigation and they all confess to what they did. And with blood, Diaz is very serious and tells them that he had to do this to stay safe and to prevent any of the soldiers from making fun of him. After he joins, Diaz is sentenced to 8 years of hard labor, Clark is sentenced to life in prison, Hatcher is sentenced to 15 years in prison, and Tony is sentenced to 10 years. Erickson is following the trial and is being followed. But we don't know what it is because Erickson suddenly wakes up shaken and finds himself still on the bus, looking at the Asian girl who appears there and was looking at him while he was sleeping. Erickson is also thinking about his share in the army. The bus stops and the girl gets off, but she forgets her shawl, so Erickson runs after her and calls her and gives her his hand. The girl thanks him and walks away, but she reacts when Erickson calls her in Vietnamese. I hope you enjoyed the movie summary. Join our family to follow all the news. Until next time.